On this episode of Death by Adulting, how to become friends in time with your children, how to be successful in the journey from authority to friend in the life of your child, plus much, much more. Roll the intro.
I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Death by Adulting. I'm your host, Megan Scheibner, with my co-host and friend, Dr. Steve Scheibner.
And friend.
And I'm excited about this episode. This is something we talk to a lot of couples about. Couples our age who are struggling with a lack of friendship with their kids.
Right.
And really young couples who are watching just run themselves ragged trying to be best friends with their kids. And there's got to be a better way.
There is. And there's a progression in that place, because it's a good goal to want to become friends with your children, but I'm going to say your adult children.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't start out as a friend. We're going to walk you through all that on this episode, but it doesn't start out there. And you observe other families, and boy, it's all over the map, right? Some families they can't abide each other. They don't. Their kids are grown and gone. They don't even speak to each other. And there's others that are just as tight as a gnat, and they just laugh and joke all the time.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, what's the secret here to having a close knit family? Not a perfect family. There's always issues in every family. We all get that. There's issues in our family as well. But a close knit family, there's a lot of love. What's the secret on that? And we're going to kind of walk you through the various phases of how to get there from here."
Yeah. And it's not that hard, but it does take some work on our part.
Yep. So let's jump into where we left off in last week's episode. And I want to show you the graphic that we had up last week. And we talked about budding, primary, and secondary responsibilities. If you recall this tree, if you didn't see last week's episode, go back and watch last episode. But budding, primary, and secondary was all about responsibilities. Now, in tandem with those responsibilities, I want to talk to you about a progression. And you can see I've got a kind of a chart here on the right-hand side of your screen that starts down at the bottom with birth and goes all the way up to the adult years. And I'm going to fill in each one of these boxes. And the ages that you see on the right side of your screen are general Steve and Megan
Guidelines.
They're guidelines. We
Yeah.
came up with those. There's nothing scientific about it, but we've been at this a long time. We had 8 kids. I've got a PhD in parenting. There's quite a bit of science behind this, but it's not, the day they turn 6, it's got to be this way.
Right.
Right. So it's in general. So I've said that now. So let's go back to our graph here. And let's talk, Megan, a little bit about where we start out. So birth to 6 years, the parent is, and read that word, the authority in the life of a child. What does it look like to be the authority in the life of a child?
It looks like I instruct and the child obeys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I mean, I think there's a real fear in our culture of being the authority. Like, I don't want to be the authority of my child. But that's absolutely what they need. In that age range,
Right.
having both parents, hopefully, who are authorities, gives security. It's the walls of security that help our children feel secure. They can trust us. They're comfortable in their surroundings. Steve, talk a little bit about what walls of security do when a child pushes against it. Because
Sure.
although absolutely we need to be the authority, that doesn't mean our kids are going to go, "Oh, please, mommy, be my authority. I
Right.
love it
Well,
when you tell me what to do."
None of us do. We don't
Right.
like authority. All of us have problems with authority. And so, especially in the life of a child, they're going to push back at that. And that illustration is really a rich one because as you say to them, "No, you must do it because mommy said so," and you give them instructions and hopefully clear and unambiguous instructions. We've talked about that on past episodes. Don't say okay at the end. You just made it optional if you do that. Must and now are your best friends. But as your children push back on the direction that you're trying to give them in their life, it's like me pushing on this wall behind us, right? The Death by Adulting wall is right back here. And if I went and I pushed on that wall, you would expect that wall to stay put and not to give way. But if I pushed on that wall, and mom and dad, you are the walls in the life of a child. You are the standard. Whatever standard you pick for your family, just make sure it doesn't move. It doesn't bend. And so when they come and they push back on the standard, they expect it to stay put. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Just be consistent with that, and your kids will be secure. But if they push on you, and they will. They'll push on you all the time. They'll
It's
push
their
on you
job.
20 times, 100 times a day. You know, who knows how many times. They'll push back, push back, push back. And if they do, and you move, the standard shifts back and forth, it builds insecurity. Because why? If that wall behind me begins to move, guess what? The ceiling's going to fall in, and it makes me feel very insecure.
Right.
Right? And so the same thing with a child. All they need is consistency from you with whatever standard it is that you set. Now, you might be saying, well, if I don't set a standard, I don't have that problem. No. If you don't set a standard, you're really going to have a neurotic, nervous child.
Just look up any of the studies. It's very interesting. You would think children who had no boundaries would be just happy-go-lucky.
Happy as can be.
But they are the most fearful children.
Fearful.
Now, so if you're saying consistency, that means that if something is a standard or a rule on Monday, but Tuesday I have a headache and I'm laying on the couch, it still needs to be the rule?
Yes, it still needs to be the rule.
Yeah,
right?
and in this age, quite honestly, at the beginning, there is no why attached to it. I don't have
Correct.
to explain to my children as the authority. Simply obeying me
Because mommy said
is the
so.
big why. Now, as they get closer to that upper edge of 5, I'm going to begin to teach into
Right.
why. And here's why we do that.
Right.
But on none of these age groups, when I ask a child to do something and they're kind of belligerent with me and they say, why?
Right.
That's not an answer that they have earned.
Right. A child that does that all the time. Why? They're manipulating you, and don't put up with that. That's a verbal freedom that they haven't earned. When they get to be older, there's an appropriate way to ask a why question, but it's not that. There's a difference between the demanding, I don't want to do this,
Right.
you're imposing on me why, and a sincerely curious, Mom, explain to me why you want me to do
Yeah,
this.
why do we always do that, Mom?
That's different. Okay. So that's going to come later on down the road. Okay. So let's go back to our graph here now. So we started out as authorities in the life of the child. We've explained that. Next, now we're going to become the trainer. And a trainer looks different than an authority. It's not quite a coach yet. Talk to me about what a trainer looks like.
Well, a trainer they're kind of in the game, right? They're not just on the sideline. And so in my home, a trainer looked like I'm coming alongside you. You had a misunderstanding with your friend down the street. We're going to talk together and role play how you go make that right. I don't
Right.
just say, go get right with your friend.
And I'm not going to go get right
And
for
I'm not
you.
going to go get right with
Now,
your friend.
when the authority phase, if you got a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old that gets wrong with
Yeah.
somebody, Mom and Dad, you might have to go fix
Yeah,
it.
you may march them down and say,
Now-
you need to ask,
Right.
you need to say you're sorry, you need to give back the toy you took, whatever it is.
Right.
As a trainer, I'm going to ask good questions. I'm going to say, well, how do you think we resolve this?
Right.
And then, well, tell me what you would say to your friend. Okay, great. I would add this if I were you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're helping them. It could be as simple as a chore. It could be as complex as a broken relationship. But we're kind of in the game with them, asking good questions, helping them fine tune how life
Well,
goes.
if you think of a trainer, there's 2 trainers I think of, like a physical therapist, and then we love baseball. So
Yeah.
we go to baseball games. Before the baseball game gets started, especially the professional games, there's trainers out there, and the guys are running and they're stretching and they're throwing the ball back and forth. And then you see a trainer and he's got a guy's leg and he's like that, and they're out there with them exercising these guys. It's not that the trainer's sitting. Now the coach isn't doing that,
No.
right? The coach is sitting back in the dugout, sipping a latte, getting ready for the game to get started. The trainer is the one that's out there with them, participating in it side by side. But that's going to change at some point when we go from trainer to coach.
And if you think about it, the trainer is the one that says, yeah, you probably know how to do this, but we're going to do it again anyway.
Right.
We're going to keep doing it until I know you know what you know.
Right. But the trainer's also not doing it for them. The
Right.
trainer's not the player that's in the game. The trainer is the one that's getting the player to get ready to be in the game. That's the role of the parent. So Mom and Dad, many times we get that out of line. We're just like, well, I'll do it for you. The snowplow parent, the resume parent, the helicopter parent, I'll just do it for you. I'll write that paper for you. I'll make that excuse for you. I'll go confront that teacher for you. No. Those are not appropriate things. You need to allow your child to fail at
And on the
times.
flip side of that, in this age, there's a lot of parenting now that is, I don't know, you figure it out. And they're not ready to figure it out.
They're
They
not.
need a trainer in there to
They
help
do.
them learn.
Absolutely. A physical therapist would walk you through why you're doing what you're doing in order to get better. And so the same thing with a parent. You're trying to get that child to get better at being an adult, and you're going to walk them through that process. That's your role. Okay, so that's very good. That's a good explanation of a trainer. So let's take a look now at the next phase, age 13 to 18-ish. Again, these are very general ages. You might have a more mature child, but now you are the coach. And the coach, as I alluded to earlier, is sitting in the dugout. They're sitting on the sideline. They are not in the game with... Now, were they helping with practice during the week? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Were they blowing the whistle on the sideline? Yep. They're not in the game with you. They're not helping you stretch. They're saying to you, did you stretch? Yep. Okay. If you didn't stretch, you're going to pull a hamstring.
And they're yelling encouragement from the sidelines. I know you got this.
You know the game plan. We've gone over the game plan. When I was a trainer, we went over the game plan. Any questions for me before you go out into that big old world out there? Okay. And then the coach is going to let them fail. Now, you watch it all the time. Every Sunday in football, you know, the coach is over there. He's got the clipboard and somebody on the team screws up. He takes the clipboard, he throws it on the ground, he stomps around. You know, Mom and Dad, you're going to do a fair amount of that, but you're doing that from the sideline. You're not doing that. You're not saying, okay, that's it, you kids. You're going to stay in the house from now on. You can't go out into the real world. I'll go do it for you. I'm saying this, but there's a fair amount of parents that do that.
Well, here's a good illustration. Think of when your child goes for a driver's test. Mm-hmm. You can't get in the car with them.
Right.
But as they're heading out the door, you say to them, remember everything you learned.
Right.
You've got this.
That's a really good example.
Yeah.
Right, of what a coach does. So a coach has gotten the game plan put together. They've walked them through it. They've helped them along the way. But now they're going to give them the freedom to fail. And that's hugely important. Mom and Dad, you've got to give your kids the freedom to fail. They will fail, but we learn more about life. We build more character from our failures than we do our successes. Why? Because we fail in life more than we succeed. And you've got to let your children fail as well. It's okay.
And there are good coaches who, when their child fails or when their athlete fails, asks them questions and helps them recognize where the failure came from and how to do things different. And there are bad parents and coaches who just yell.
Yeah.
And
right.
so who are you going to be?
Right. So again, that's a good example. So if you're a good coach and you let your kid go out and your kid failed, epic fail, that child eventually comes home. They might not want to.
You acknowledge the failure.
And you say, okay, well, let's talk about that. That didn't work out so well. What went wrong? And then you have a debrief after the game, basically, and say, okay, what went wrong? Well, all right. I taught you differently than that, didn't I? Yes, Dad. Yes, Mom, you did. Okay, what are you going to do differently next time? I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to trust that guy. I'm not going to do... Okay, good. It might be a while before you get the keys to the car back, but once you do, I think you're going to have learned this lesson. All right, and then Mom and Dad, you got to be the judge of that.
And then the next thing that a good parent does, a good coach does, is they don't make excuses for it to the public.
Correct.
So, and again, we're sports fans. The coaches come up after a bad game and they don't say, well, he had a toothache and he didn't get enough sleep last night, right? They say, no, he needed to have his pitches. They weren't hitting the spot, and so you say, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry. My son really, really blew it last night. We've addressed it, and I can assure you it won't happen again.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine saying about your 17-year-old, oh, he's teething and he's a little colicky. That's why he's the way he is.
Yeah.
We started out, Mom and Dad, you started out making excuses for your kids and it didn't do you any good. And then, right?
I think about, we had a 16-year-old, because he hadn't had his license very long, who had left for school early in the morning. And about 7 minutes after he left, the phone rang. Oh. And that's, as a parent, you're like, oh, there's been an accident. Yeah. And it was a police officer. And he said to Steve, I have your son here by the side of the road. And Steve could have said, oh, he's such a good boy. Don't do anything. What can we do to get him out of this ticket? I don't want him to get points.
Right.
And
right.
instead, you did say, well, he's a good boy.
I did say.
But you said...
Well, the police officer said, yeah, I can tell that already. And I said, look, do that cop thing, man. I said, you need to put the fear of God into that kid. I said, because he's just at that age, you know what I mean? Where he thinks he knows everything. I've talked to him about it. He drives too fast.
He does.
And I said, if you give him a ticket, that's fine. Of course, I'll pay it. I said, but at the end of the day, or maybe he'll pay it.
He'll pay it, yeah.
We'll work on that. I said, but you do what you need to do. I said, but if you could really ham this up, you'd be my new best friend. And he said, oh yeah. He said, that's why I'm back here talking to you right now. He said, I got the whole shtick down. He said, I'm going to give him the full thing. And he did. Now he gave him a warning and let him off, but he put the fear of the police into him,
Yeah.
which was an important developmental step for a kid who had a lead foot.
Right. Where we could have stepped in and tried to make it better. There's
Right.
times as a coach,
Nope.
you just got to let it
Nope,
happen.
don't make it better. Yeah. And if you can pile on, that's okay too.
Nicely. Pile on nicely.
Pile on nicely. Right? Be a good parent, pile on nicely. All right, now we're going to end up at where we want to end up. So let's go back to our graph here. We start out as an authority in the life of a child. Be the parent. Trainer, be the parent. Coach, be the parent. Okay. Now we're going to end up, hopefully, as friends. And this is, again, 18 and above. This is the goal, is being friends with your kids. A lot of parents get this backwards.
Yeah.
They get it upside down. They try to start out by being a buddy, being a pal, being a peer, and then they become more of a coach. Like, well, I feel funny about saying this. Then they become a trainer. They're in the game with them. They're manipulating them when they're 13, 14 years old.
Because they're worried they're going to fail.
Right. The kids are pushing back all the time. Like, leave me alone. Let me have some space. And then they become the authority in the life of the child when they get to be 16, 17, 18 years old. I'm going to crack down on you. I should have been harder on you from the beginning. Well, no, you should have been an authority in the beginning. That doesn't mean to be mean in the beginning, just be the authority. But you got it backwards. If you crack down on a 16, 17, 18-year-old, it'll break the relationship.
It will.
And the day they turn 18, they'll hit the road and they won't darken your door again. So mom and dad, put this in the right way. End up as friends. Now, how would you characterize our relationship with our adult children?
Oh, we're definitely friends. And I know that because when something exciting happens to them or something hard, we find out with all the rest of their friends. They text us, they text their friends. It's an interesting thing for me. I do ladies retreats at our beach house. Just follow us at characterhealth.com. You'll find out about those. But often the ladies are stunned by how often my kids call. So at 3:30 in the afternoon,
The phone starts
I have
ringing.
8 kids.
Yeah.
The phone starts to ring because that's when 3:30 is when the first one gets off work, and then it just continues. And they aren't calling because they have to. Kids, you don't have to. They're calling just because I'm part of their world. They aren't asking for money. They just call and tell me the funny things that went on in their day. They text me sometimes instead. But there's this open line of communication.
Right. And the world of memes now has opened up that, the fire hose of memes, and
Especially with me and the boys.
and you and the boys and they're sending memes back and forth to each other. It's got to be a special one for them to send me a meme.
Yeah.
But I'll do it sometimes. It's fun. It helps us to laugh together. It's saying, hey, I'm thinking about you while I'm away.
Right.
And that's really important. It's that family identity that you wanted to build didn't get built by mistake. You started out as an authority. You became a trainer. You're in the game with them. You're on the coach. You're on the sideline. You're giving them the freedom to fail. You're teaching into it when they do. And eventually you become a friend with them. I want to talk just in the last couple minutes here, this episode, about just some tools for the adult friendships. You talked about one, which is you're texting back and forth with each other. What are some other things?
So this is probably the most important tool, and this is just a self-control on the part of the parent. I think all of my kids would say they know they can share what they're going to do with me or what they think without me immediately falling back into authority mode.
Right.
And going, oh, you can't think that way. You can't do that. Here's what you have to do instead.
Right.
And that is a self-discipline because if you want to maintain that friendship and be a friend that they'll come to for counsel, wait till they ask for it. Don't shove it down their throats.
So, yeah, like when they were little and you were putting them down into bed and they opened up that little window of their heart to you, Mommy, Daddy, what do you think about, or I like a boy, or I like a girl, that conversation, don't go in and rearrange the furniture. Well, it's the same thing when they become adults. They're going to share with you stuff. They're raising your grandchildren, their own children, and they share something with you that you would be appalled by, but they think it's funny with their child. And you just have to go, oh, well, isn't that wonderful? And just kind of not weigh in. You have to be asked in.
Yeah.
Right? You can't barge in anymore. You say, we will do this with our kids. We'll say, are you asking me for advice? And I make them say it 3 times. Are you seriously asking me for advice? Because if you're asking me for advice, I want you to take it, but I don't want to just give you. No, Mom, Dad, I want you to tell me, what do you think? Okay. 3rd time. Here's what I think.
And if it's a married child, we add a question, which is, does your spouse know you're talking to me?
Right.
Right. Because otherwise it could easily just
Especially
be
if
gossip.
it's about the spouse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
So
we don't want to be a party to gossip.
kind of the paradigm that it is as an authority and even as a trainer, our kids asked our permission and we informed them of what they were going to do. Now that we're friends, I ask them good questions about their life and they inform me of what they're going to do.
So we have a family group text. We've had that since they were old enough to they earned the right to have a phone.
Right.
Right. So we started the family group text and everybody's on it. And it's a riot, you know, because it dings all the time. I'll be up speaking at a lecture or something and my phone's in my pocket and I'll feel it.
Yeah, it gets going.
I know the family text. Something really funny just happened on the family text. The other one is we're all in a fantasy football league together. And Sundays, it starts on Thursday night.
Yeah, it starts Thursday night.
But Sundays, it really fires up. And I mean, the trash talking's out of control. But you know what? It's fun. And it's a way for us to stay connected, even though we're here, there, and everywhere. You know, we've moved over the years and we're not all right in the same house anymore.
Yeah. And the very first thing you said is what it is. Friendship with our kids is a goal.
It's a goal.
It's not a destination when they're born. We don't start there, and they don't need us to start there. They have lots of little friends.
Yep.
I'm not a little friend. I'm your mommy.
Right. So be the parent. And in the authority phase, that means you don't have to be mean. You just have to be an authority.
Right.
Say what you mean what you say, put a smile on your face. Don't say okay at the end. I'm telling you. Then you become the trainer. Now it's a little looser. Let's talk about this. Let's discuss it together.
Here's some
Why
ideas
do you
for
think
you.
that's a good
Yeah.
idea? Here's some ideas for you. Then when you become the coach, now it's like, well, you tell me. What do you think see how the progression has changed? Instead of me, now it's, well, you tell me. What do you think is the right thing here? Okay, all right. And you might disagree at some time. You go, okay, well, give that a try. Let's see how that works out, right?
Yeah.
Give them enough leash to fail. And then eventually you become friends, and that's a free-for-all. It's like a free-range chicken thing. That's just a lot of fun.
And you're friendly in all of those phases.
You are.
Yeah.
You are. This is a good episode. I like this. This is practical.
Yeah. And for our kids, we're really glad you're our friends.
Yes.
I'd pick you,
Yeah.
even if you weren't my kids.
I would too.
So,
I would too.
all right, this has been Death by Adulting. I'm your host, Megan Scheibner, with my co-host, Dr. Steve Scheibner. And remember, when it comes to adulting, what doesn't kill you just makes you tired.